Namaskar. Today in the book review section, we're going to review Midnight in Chernobyl by Adam Higginbotham. Soviet Union wanted to expand its nuclear power program to meet its electricity need and to compete with Western countries. The Soviet Union launched an ambitious new program of building nuclear reactors early in the 1970s. The USSR had been a world leader in nuclear technology. In 1954, it built the first nuclear reactor capable of generating commercial-grade electricity. But by the early 1970s, it had been entered the era of stagnation while the United States was landing astronauts on the moon. With its new nuclear project, the Soviet Union sought to establish itself as the world leader in nuclear power. It would build the greatest nuclear power station on Earth in Chernobyl, Ukraine. Chernobyl, the plant, would be the first nuclear power plant in Ukraine sitting along the Pripyat and the Dnipro rivers. The new director and the sole employee of the Chernobyl Atomic Energy Station, Viktor Burkhanov, created its infrastructure, a rail line leading to the nearest train station, the riverside dock and temporary workers' village. The plant's original plan included a new nuclear reactor model, the RBMK, or high power channel type reactor, larger and more powerful than any reactor in the West. The deadlines set by his bosses in Moscow and Kiev required Burkhanov to work with superhuman dispatch. In principle, a single RBMK reactor could generate enough electricity to serve 1 million homes. According to the ninth five-year plan, the first reactor was to go online at the end of 1975. The Soviet state viewed its nuclear industry as a security secret and did not report any failure. The Soviet Union had detonated its first atomic bomb on August 29, 1949, the culmination of a project with the code name Problem Number 1 that took place under the leadership of physicist Igor Kurchatov. By the end of 1952, Soviet authorities inaugurated the Scientific Research and Design Institute of Energy Technology for the purpose of creating civilian reactors. However, the Soviet Union's participation in International Atomic Energy Agency dating back to 1957 requires it to report nuclear accidents. It has never reported a single one. On paper, it had the safest nuclear industry in the world. Yet, on September 29, 1957, a major explosion occurred on the reactor in the southern Urals. This complex did not appear on the civilian maps. The truth about the explosion did not come out for decades, but it remained the worst nuclear accident in history for many years. The RBMK reactor was immense, risky and prone to explosion. In 1966, the government officially approved construction of new generation of nuclear reactors, the RBMK. A gigantic cylinder made from some 1700 tons of graphite blocks formed the RBMK's core. Boron carbide rods, which would slide in or out of the reactor to control the nuclear chain reaction, regulated its power. To protect plant workers, a tank of water encased in an 8-story vault and capped with metal boxes of iron shot mixed with neutron-retarding mineral serpentine surrounded the reactor's core. The RBMK spoke to Soviets' gigantism, but existing Soviet factories could manufacture its parts, and those were easy to assemble on site. A Leningrad factory that made tanks and tractors created the draft plans for the RBMK. One dissenting scientist deemed the design too risky to use in civilian areas, and another scientist claimed that these types of reactor would be prone to explosion. But the construction of the new reactors moved forward. Engineers did not arrive at a final reactor design until 1968. To save time, those in charge bypassed the prototype phase and put the reactor into mass production, and that was devastating. After 18 years, that is on 25th April 1986, staff at the Chernobyl station began a safety test of reactor number 4. Within hours, the reactor exploded. When the midnight shift arrived on April 25, 1986, the day's test had not been yet started, and the station's deputy chief engineer Anatoly Tatalov was wary and irritable. The test was to gauge a safety system to protect reactor number 4 during a power outage. It was a design basis accident in which a power loss would cause pumps circulating coolant to stop, thus putting the reactor at a risk of core meltdown. The reactor was like a pistol. All that remained was for someone to pull the trigger. The staff began to power the reactor down, leaving it at 720 megawatts. At Dyatlow's insistence, they pushed it lower. The power kept dropping lower and lower until alarms sounded. Nuclear safety protocol dictated they should abort the test. The reactor was filling with toxic xenon 135 gas. Less than 10 minutes after the power had started to go down, staff attempted to revive the contaminated reactor using manual control rods. They should have geared down the plant's generator. Reactivity first dropped predictably and then suddenly and uncontrollably spiked upward. At 1:24 am, reactor number 4 exploded with a force equivalent to more than 50 tons of dynamite. It was completely destroyed. Tons of uranium fuel and graphite blocks shattered into minuscule pieces and shot into air in a radioactive cloud. Some 1,300 tons of glowing radioactive rubble caught fire. Hours passed before the plant director and other officials acknowledged the event and summoned fire crews. Close to 1:30 am, flames shot high into the air from Chernobyl. An alarm sounded at the nearby paramilitary fire station number 2. Men on the third shift had felt the explosion. People in the Unit 4 control room tried to understand what had happened and what their instruments were telling them. It looked like a maximum design basis accident, and that included possibility of total core meltdown. People who went outside Control Room 4 saw everything in ruins. The ceiling and walls were gone. The station was open to the sky. Where the reactor once stood, they saw a shimmering column of blue-white light, a result of the radioactive ionization of the air. That meant the live nuclear reactor was exposed to the open air. They were staring into the empty space. In the administrative office, in the bunker beneath the plant, senior staff and other personnel struggled to believe what was happening. Many were unable to overcome the belief that the nuclear reactor could not explode. Even though they saw the destruction, some thought that the reactor was undamaged and the explosion had occurred in another location. By 7 am, they summoned fire crews from all over the Kiev region. The firemen put out the visible fires, but where reactor number 4 once stood was a radioactive blaze of uranium and graphite. A full 32 hours after the disaster, authorities issued a careful worded public statement about the accident. At 10 am on Sunday, April 26, authorities ordered the evacuation of nearby town Pripyat. Scientists formulated a plan to drop a variety of substances into the ruined reactor to stop the fire and prevent the release of radioactivity. The pilots and engineers of the 51st Guards Helicopter Regiment returned again and again to filling bags of boron and sand into the mouth of the radioactive volcano. Authorities had helicopters bomb the reactor site with powder boron, which would prevent further chain reaction in the uranium. A cloud of radiation traveled thousands of miles, alerting international authorities and forcing Mikhail Gorbachev and Soviet officials to respond. A cloud of radiation rose some 1500 meters and moved across the Soviet Union and the Baltic Sea. The cloud contained xenon 133. As well as pieces of radioactive graphite and radioactive isotopes such as iodine 131 and cesium 137. Soviet scientists did not measure radiation in the air until a day after the accident. By that time, much of it had moved toward the Scandinavia. The next day, authorities in Stockholm received a report of abnormal levels of radiation across the region, but they determined beyond doubt that Sweden was not its source. By the end of the week, New York Post was going to press with unconfirmed reports from Ukraine that 15,000 people had been killed in the accident, their bodies buried in mass graves. In July 1987, Soviet authorities put the people accused of causing the disaster on trial. Plant director Viktor Burkhanov and five other men who were allegedly responsible for the disaster at Chernobyl went on trial on July 7, 1987. By Soviet law, the trial had to take place within the district where the crime took place. But because a year later, Pripyat was still part of contaminated exclusion zone. The trial moved to Chernobyl. The government allowed a few representatives of the press to attend, notably from BBC Radio and Japanese TV, but they were allowed to hear only opening and closing remarks. On July 29, the judge found everyone guilty. The senior people like Burkhanov and Detalov received maximum sentence of 10 years in jail. On December 4, 1987, after months of decontamination and repair, the three surviving reactors at the Chernobyl Atomic Energy Station went back online. However, 25 years after the destruction of reactor number 4, the exclusion zone surrounding the power plant remained contaminated. Thanks.